we have our very own president, Sloan Dudley. Sorry, Sloan, I messed up your thing. Sloan Dudley, who's going to talk about the research and writing that she has done in regards to this event and being a part of this group. So, take it away.
Okay, I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm at an airport today. So if I get interrupted by a loudspeaker, we're just going to keep going. Okay? Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start off by saying, not only on behalf of myself, but of all of the officers of Access Autism, welcome again to our Fall 2020 event. Simply by attending this event, you're showing your interest in the betterment of the neurodiverse community here at ACC, and for that, I am really sincerely grateful. To briefly introduce myself, as Sam said, I am Sloan Dudley. I'm an ACC student. I have a diagnosis of Autism Spectrum Disorder. I am studying to teach special education, and I am the president of Access Autism. The question I would like to pose to you all today is why we are here. Not quite the big question of the meaning of life, but why is Access Autism here? Why are all of us spending a Tuesday in this meeting today? To answer that question, I want to start by talking about the transition from high school to college. When a student on the autism spectrum transitions into their college years from high school, they face a lot of challenges. Many students have changes in their accommodations, they have trouble finding work, or they're even just finding out about their autism diagnosis for the first time. On the next slide, I have some statistics about some of this. So, as you can see here, 500,000 youth diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder enter adulthood every single year. Only 667 of these youth enter college. And an even smaller of those, 65,000 or 39-ish% of these people actually disclose their disability to their college. With that said, 20 to 39% of those diagnosed don't graduate after 5 to 7 years of being in college. So there you can see a clear correlation between the rate of disclosure and the rate of graduation. And obviously, as we stated before, people on the autism spectrum then move forward to have a much higher unemployment rate than any other diagnosed disability. So, why? Why do students on the spectrum face these struggles? Why do we see students like me, who can be the president of an organization like this one, and take 3 years to complete a 2-year degree? To answer that question, I'd like to first reflect back on this idea of autism being a spectrum that we touched on earlier, and what that means. When people hear autism spectrum disorder, they often think of a linear model, like the one that we see on the left. And that's a way that we can describe things as high functioning and low functioning, and that's just simply not accurate. When thinking of the autism spectrum, it's much more accurate to think of a model like the one given on the right. An autism diagnosis is based on a combination of symptoms in areas of social skills, sensory sensitivity, language skills, cognitive function, executive function, and motor skills. Every person with autism is going to have struggles in these areas in some form or fashion, but the way that it affects them can vary widely from person to person. This is why one person with autism is going to present very differently than another person with autism in a lot of cases. With this said, due to every student's different needs, every student is going to need very different things to be accommodated in their schooling. And on this point, I have collected some information from members of my organization that I would like to go over with you today. But first, we need background information, which is what I have on this slide. Most students with an autism diagnosis that are coming in to college are leaving high school where they had an IEP, or an individualized education plan. Upon transition to college, all students are moved into what is called a 504 plan. which is similar to an IEP, but much less specific and specialized to the student's individual needs. This has led to a situation that while it is crucially important for students to work with student accessibility services, or SAS, to receive the accommodations that they can, at no real fault of student accessibility services, the accommodations that they are able to provide is often not able to fulfill what the student's needs actually are, which is what we're going to look at in the data I've collected.
Thank you for calling off.
In my first slide here, we see student A. I wanted to look at them first due to the uniqueness of their situation. As you can see, while this student was receiving accommodations in high school, they do not currently have accommodations for their college courses. This is going to create quite a challenging environment for this student. And thus, if you hear of a student in this type of situation, it is important that you encourage them to seek accommodations so that they can get those accommodations that SAS can provide, as we do in our organization. Now, looking at student B, we begin to observe the need versus available accommodation deficit that exists at the college level. As you can see, this student received various accommodations in their high school plan and is now receiving one of the same accommodations only, even though there's not been a drastic change in what their needs are to be successful. And you can take a moment to look at what those accommodations were before we move on to the next slide. Moving on to student C, we can see similar circumstances as to the one we saw with student B. When you compare their high school and their college accommodations, not only are things lessened, but once again, we see many previously available accommodations outright missing from their current plan because they're simply not available through 504. In this and the next example, we're looking at something similar but slightly different. Here you see accommodations that have been recommended to the college student by a professional outside of the college system who specializes in the diagnosis and/or treatment of autism. As you can see, in this type of example, we see the same type of deficit, where a student's needs to be successful is far more extensive than what can be provided by 504 accommodations. Now, looking at this one, we are looking at my personal recommended accommodations. These accommodations were recommended to me by the neuropsychologist who spent an entire day in a session with me and weeks going over my testing results and responses to questions in order to diagnose me with autism at 17 years old. Meaning, yes, these recommendations were given to me as I was preparing to enter college. So they are not out of date, they are current. Now, I'm going to move forward. We're going to look at these accommodations more in depth, why they are important, why they are the way they are, since they are the ones that are personal to me, so I know a little bit more about them. During solo work segments of class, I should be allowed to wear headphones to decrease distractions. As we mentioned previously, sensory is a big part of autism. My strongest sensory distractor or struggle is with auditory sensory. As you guys have noticed, I am a little bit distracted by those side announcements that are going on today because I'm in an airport. The same thing happens with any extraneous noise in class. In fact, I call it my unwanted superpower. I can hear anything not only going on in my classroom, but the classroom 3 classrooms over. So having headphones is really important to my focus. The professor should provide preferred seating such that I can sit closer to the board, closer to the door, things to increase my ability to leave the classroom if I am overwhelmed and to decrease the chances of me getting overwhelmed in the first place. I should be allowed unlimited time on tests, as to have extra processing time that I need, which goes along with the cognitive function aspects of autism. And decrease anxiety over deadlines that can build very easily for people on the spectrum. And tests should be administered in a non-distracting environment with close supervision, of course. But the non-distracting environment is, again, for those sensory needs. Allow written assignments to be completed on a computer utilizing spell check and grammar checkers. Many people with autism, and myself included, struggle with spelling and grammar. This is simply because spelling and grammar fall under those communication and language things, right? And so it makes sense that that's going to be, even if I am smart, I know what I'm supposed to be writing, the spelling and grammar are going to be a little bit more of a challenge. The people at the school should work with me to find adequate spaces for me to retreat during panic attacks or meltdowns, and allow me to leave class during these panic attacks and meltdowns without imposed consequences. Obviously, if I have a panic attack or meltdown, which is something that will be described more deeply for those of you that don't know much about it further in the presentation, that's something where I get very overwhelmed and I can't really control it. So it's important for me to get out of the overwhelming environment and into somewhere where I can keep myself safe. So being able to have a safe place and not be penalized for that is something that's super useful. Allow extra time on assignments on a case-by-case basis. Obviously, this again has to do with the processing speed, the cognitive function, and the deadlines, right? Provide prepared copies of notes. This has to do with multiple things. This has to do with my ability to take notes during class, which has to do with that cognitive processing and all of that again, and the way that I take in information. For myself and many people on the spectrum, it is much easier to take in information if you have something visually and auditory. So if someone is lecturing to me and I already have notes in front of me before class, I'm going to retain the information 1,000 times better than if I am just listening to the lecture. Accompany oral directions with written directions. Exact same idea as the idea with the prepared copies of notes. Having those written directions and oral directions just makes it so much easier to process. Break longer presentations and assignments into shorter segments. 2 ideas again on this one: decreases overwhelm and all of those things, and helps give clear, concise instructions, which is super crucial for people on the autism spectrum in general, not just myself. And when you break things down, it's much easier to give concise, clear, and direct instruction. And provide study skills training and time management training, which is helpful for everybody, right? But these are 2 things, study skills and time management, that people on the spectrum struggle with across the board, more than at a higher level of struggle than the average student. So that's where all those come from. Now let's look at my accommodations that I received. So highlighted are the accommodations that I do receive from the school through SAS. I am allowed to wear my headphones during solo work segments of class, which is amazing. I am allowed preferred seating. Now, I don't typically use my preferred seating because every time I request my preferred seating, I have to go up to my professor and ask my professor every time at the beginning of class for my seat, because they don't reserve my seat for me. And many of my professors just say, just get to class 15 minutes early and then you can choose your seat, which isn't as simple as it sounds, because not everyone can get to class 15 minutes early. We have other classes, we have work. There's lots of things that go into that, and it's, but allowing unlimited time on tests isn't there, but I am allowed double time on tests, and I take my tests in the testing center. So there's still some flaws with that, but it's very helpful. And I do not get prepared copies of notes before class. So I don't get the visual and the auditory at the same time, but I do have note-taking assistance via a note taker that I get notes after class, which again, isn't exactly the same, but is very helpful. But through that, you can see that there's a big difference, right, in what would be the most beneficial to put me on that level playing field with the rest of my peers, and then what I'm able to receive through those 504 accommodations. So moving forward from that, what did we look at today, right? I've been talking to y'all for quite a few minutes now. To start, autism is defined by certain characteristics, and it's a very different experience for everybody. And that is a big point to think about going into the rest of the presentation today, and a big point as to why we're here, right? We're going to be looking at that today and how to best help everyone with that thought in mind, that it's different for every single person. A next big point is that disclosure of your diagnosis to SAS is crucially important for people with ASD. We want that completion rate to be so much higher. And those accommodations, though they're not perfect, make such a big difference. And they are we get them by law. They are provided to us, and that's amazing. And so we need to take advantage of those things we are able to get. And then lastly, there is a clear deficit in what students with autism's needs are and what accommodations can provide alone. So it is important that we have things like this, that the entirety of the higher education system is aware of this deficit, and thus aware of the ways that we can help fill this deficit with other supports, because we can do other things on top of the accommodations to help students. So the last thing in my presentation is just a few ideas of, if you are a professor, if you are in a classroom, how you can help a student beyond their accommodations, which is having prepared copies of notes for students, creating a sensory-friendly environment in the ways that I listed, reserving seats for those students, which you can just do with a folded piece of paper, those students who have preferred seating. If you're teaching at the Northridge campus, encouraging students, or becoming aware of first that there is a sensory space in the advising area, and encouraging students to use that space to help them de-stress and calm down, and as a place to retreat in moments of high stress. Allow sensory fidget toys and devices in the classroom, and just being aware of the needs. And then you can start making adjustments on your own as you learn. And so then lastly, I wanted to open up to y'all. I gave y'all a lot of information, and I'm not going to be here the whole time. If anyone has any questions for me, because I'm not going to be at the big Q&A panel, I am more than happy to answer questions on any of the information that I just provided you.
Thank you, Sloan. So if you have a question, feel free to use the chat. Feel free to use the raise your hand thing button that's now on here, or just, come off mute and we'll, she's a wealth of knowledge, as you can tell, and she's very open to share. So please.
I'm happy to answer questions about my personal experience too. I'm not shy, so.
All right. Please let us know if you have questions.
I have a question. My name's Deanna Whaley. I work in the game animation motion graphics department. I advise students, help them plan their courses. My question to you, well, this was a great presentation, Sloan. You did an excellent job.
Oh, thank you.
I would like to get a recording of this to pass on to more of our instructors in our area. But my question is, a lot of our students need to do presentations at one point or another through at a certain point in their degree plan. Is there something that instructors can do to make the students feel more comfortable when presenting?
I would recommend, so in my experience, not just personally, but with everyone, I've known a lot of people with autism at this point, and we all have different apprehensions about the things that make us nervous when it comes to presenting. So talk to the student one-on-one if you get the chance. And if they're having an apprehension about presenting, say, what makes it hard for you to present? And then you can start building adjustments from there, right? We might have a student that they're scared of talking in front of people, and that's it, right? But another student might just be like, the bright lights in my face stress me out. And all you have to do is dim the lights and then they're gonna feel better. So talk to the student and say, what is it about presenting that makes you feel stressed out?
Great.
Yeah, that would be my best advice. Thank you for your question.
Sure, I'll pass that along. Great information. I think they're having an easier time being online actually than in the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know I am.
I've noticed that with quite a few people are having that experience, especially when it comes to presenting, since it's not face-to-face.
Right. Thank you.
No problem.
So Janelle is asking if you can share your accommodation list from your presentation. Some of those may be helpful for students and advisors trying to help who aren't sure what to ask for.
Yeah, of course.
I want to say, I just want to say, great job, Sloan. This is Christine Price with the STEPS program here at ACC. And I wanted to give a shout out to Molly too.
What? I can't do it myself.
I already said hi to you, Rachel. Thank you guys so much for having this. Our students, I know several of our students are starting to attend the Access meetings, and so I'm really excited. Thank you guys.
Welcome, Sloan. There is a question, any tips for remote learning, from Amy?
Any tips for remote learning? So I personally, I'm one of those students that has been having a harder time with remote learning and so I would say one of the biggest struggles I've seen across the board with students is they're having trouble staying engaged with the remote learning. They're having trouble like staying on top of things because it feels, the best way that I can describe it is it feels less tangible because we're not going into class every day, right? So trying to build things that make it seem tangible, making sure you're sending out emails, making sure you're communicating with the students, encouraging students to visit you in office hours, things like that, things that make the classes feel tangible again, feel like, okay, this is a class that's happening. Because the biggest problem I'm seeing with students is the classes are feeling intangible and like out of hand because we're not going in every day. So that's my advice, is just connecting with students as much as you can, attempting to connect with students.
Anybody else have any questions or anything? So you'll be able to ask more of our panel or our students as we go along. It might be more beneficial for us to ask questions as we go than at the end. But Sloan, you did an awesome job. Thank you very much. You are a wealth of knowledge and amazing. So, okay, safe travels.
There's actually another question in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Good job. Where's it at?
He says, hi, Sloan. What is your favorite thing about being
An org president.
Oh,
Thank you, Danielle and Rachel, for pointing that out. What's my favorite thing about being an org president? That's a good question. Oh, that's hard. Oh wow. My joke answer. I'm gonna give my joke answer first. My joke answer is the attention. My real answer is the impact that I get to see that it has on other students. Like moments like right now, when I get to see like all of the other members like that have built this thing, and like I just feel so proud of like this, all of the other members of this thing. And so just like, I don't know, feeling moments like this where I get to feel proud of all of the members of the organization, I would say is my favorite part of being an org president.
thank you. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's honest. She's always honest. She'll tell you it's about the glory, but she really does care and really wants to help and move forward and bring her fellow peers along with her.